Projetor em tela cheia, iniciar janela. Projetor em tela cheia, prévia, janela.
Beleza, galera. Mais um
Play
vídeo aqui no
button.
canal. Hoje, começando aqui, mais um evento da Pax West. Tivemos
Pause button. Video
vários
pause.
eventos.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. This panel is The Good, the Bad, and the Stigmatizing, Drug Use in Games.
E
I
temos mais
just want to say really
eventos.
quickly, this is
Os
a panel that is really
concertos.
important to me, really
Não sei
important
se eu
for
vou
kind
trazer,
of
galera. Estou pensando muito bem nisso primeiro.
what I do
Vou gravar tudo aqui
as
primeiro,
a
depois
job as,
deixo
like in my
o
life
assunto por último.
personally. So I really appreciate everyone being here. So first, let's introduce everyone. I'll go first, if that's okay. I'm Brian. I am a social worker. I work for the Department of Mental Health in Massachusetts as part of their Recovery from Addictions program. I am also a person in recovery from substance use disorder, long-term recovery, and someone who's kind of a harm reduction advocate as well, trying to communicate and get more of modalities around harm reduction into the treatment that we utilize today. All right, do you want to go?
My name is Dr. Jared Kilmer. I am a clinical psychologist. I work locally here at Respect Psychological Services, and I'm also excited to be here as I am a former VA psychologist, and working in substance use rehab was one of the most fulfilling parts of my career.
I'm Ellie Loveday. I'm an associate mental health counselor. I work with Jared at Respect Psych Services. I have a long history working in healthcare, worked in EMS, very close with addiction, have a pretty pervasive family history of addiction and substance use disorder. Really interested in the use of substances and
Aí,
culture
lembrando,
and how
alguns
we
eventos
read
vão
stories
estar
of how we
trocadas
use
as
them.
datas, hein?
Hey everybody, my name is Celeste. I'm also a clinical psychologist. I work at Rochester Institute of Technology, where I'm the interim program director and research faculty in the behavioral health and forensic psychology program. And so I both practice and do research, and my practice initially involved a lot of crisis services, specifically for people who were experiencing crime or had experienced trafficking or were experiencing intimate partner violence. And then I worked for a little while in the court system doing diversion to like mental health
Então,
court
todo junho
and drug
completo,
court.
julho completo, melhor dizendo, julho
And I also
inteiro
ran
estará aqui
a
no canal.
free virtual clinic for adults experiencing homelessness. And my research work is in building and testing games to teach people mental health skills. It's like brief kind of video games that focus on like psychoeducation and then making a game mechanic version of like a coping skill.
Awesome. And we did have one more panelist who wasn't able to make it. My friend Sam, he got shingles and was planning to fly here from Boston with me. And I said, don't do that. Like, that's far. He even sent me his paperwork to prove that he did have it. I've known him for 10 years. And I said, you don't need to do that. I believe you. You could just say you can't make it. We wanted to wish feel better to Sam. He will hopefully be on a panel sometime soon. He's a very, very smart guy, and he has a lot of really good thoughts. So, and just before we get into it too, I just wanted to kind of preface this that playing games my whole life, I've kind of had these interactions with substances that were in games and not realized it. I think the first one that I really ever stood out to me that is using benzodiazepines in Metal Gear Solid to snipe better and not have as much of a sway, and not realizing that that was doing drugs in a way. And it was really fascinating to me. Kind of as I entered recovery and things like this, and became a social worker, the depictions of substances in games were sometimes not done in what I thought was the best way, and kind of increased the stigma around substance use in a lot of ways. So I thought, like, let's talk about that. So this is the second time doing it. We had a similar one at PAX East, and I'm really, really curious to kind of hear what everyone has to say. So the first question is going to be, is there an instance of substance use or substance use themes that has stood out to you in a video game?
Okay, I can go first. So I think the things that stand out to me, or when I was thinking about this question, what first came to mind was also Metal Gear Solid, the smoking to see the lasers. I think it's really interesting when the substance use is a game mechanic or a component of the narrative that is like unskippable. So when the substance use is shown as like in a kind of whimsical way, or a way where you can get in touch with how a character actually feels. So I think of like Tali in Mass Effect getting drunk. This is a trope that I think you see a lot in like romance media too, that people like drink to express their feelings. And then the other thing that came to mind for me was the Skyrim plot that you like black out in the beginning. So these are all like kind of unskippable things. And then of course like the big like major games that have substance use, like Disco Elysium, and Catherine too, I think of too, because the main character in Catherine is blacking out, and that's a big part of the narrative.
Yeah, I'll jump off of Disco Elysium. I think that's a pretty strong one in that there is a really strong tie to narrative elements. It is built into the political system, it is built into the class, it shows how policing intersects with drug use, and recovery is optional. In fact, it kind of has the opposite flip of a lot of games where you start from a place of addiction, and recovery is kind of the alternate story plot. And then my other one that pops up is, of course, Fallout, where you have a system of multiple drugs that all have their bonuses and stat debuffs that happen. And of course, you know, you can pay some caps to just not be an addict anymore, which kind of mirrors some real life elements. And if you have money, you can go to nice rehabs where the real life doesn't matter, and you can escape real world consequences by paying more to not go to jail.
I think every first encounter with substance use in video games stood out to me as kind of jarring. It surprised me, and then I got like acclimated to it and stopped thinking about
E
it.
fumar, galera, não é
But
bom,
the
é
first time I
ruim, é
was playing a
péssimo para a
video
saúde.
game and like
E
there was
pessoa que
alcohol
fuma
and I couldn't
faz
interact
mal
with it and I
mais
couldn't
à
drink
pessoa
it,
que está
that's crazy. I'm
do
gonna
lado
do that.
dela do que
I'm gonna
ela
do this.
mesma.
I'm a minor right now, and sure, maybe we get some kind of buff for it, but we also
Meu
get
pai
some
foi
kind of like
fumante.
visual defect as well.
Melhor
My
dizendo,
vision
siga
gets
sendo
hazy. And
fumante.
again, oh, this is bad, but also interesting. It's like in school when they brought the beer glasses to try to scare us out of drinking, or at least let us know how like impaired we would be. And then like, okay, that's normal, that's par for the course. And then I see
Só
games
mulher que
later in the
fumam.
future where I can take painkillers to like recover some health. And like that kind of
Eles
makes
estão mais
sense.
se matando do que
But it also
fumando.
kind of doesn't make sense, and like I'm stuck on that in my head, and I'm honestly I'm still processing like how good a choice
Ainda
that was.
matando outros que estão em volta deles.
And the most recent example that I want to talk about later in this panel is like drinking in Darkest Dungeon, because it's not just some immediate buff or like little quirk I have to get through. It's
É
like
muita
a way
ignorância do
people are
povo
coping with
fumante.
stress, and if they use that methodology too often, certain bad
Eles acham
things happen,
legal
like it becomes the only
isso,
way they
mas
learn
não é legal.
deal with stress, for example. So yeah, basically, my answer is every time I encounter a novel way drugs are introduced in video games, it's kind of jarring. Just how close to and far away from reality it is.
Videogame é videogame. Não traga na vida real.
I appreciate all of that. I just wanted, the one that comes up for me in this is Fallout as well. It was one that really stood out to me. Fallout is a game I played when I first entered recovery. I had nothing to do, and I was like, oh, I should spend my time doing something. So I played a lot of Fallout 4 in that time, and that was one that really stood out. Just if you had just left the treatment facility and you go to cure your addiction for 60 caps, it's kind of insulting in a way, because a lot more went into that. And then I think the Kate storyline is really, really powerful in Fallout 4, where she has a lot of trauma due to her past, and she kind of, you know, uses substances to cope with that, which is a very, very common thing. But then once she is cured of her addiction by some magical detox vault, which was also a whole thing, but she doesn't like that when your character uses substances. Before, she would enjoy if you were to use a substance. After that, she doesn't. And I think there's so much more nuance to that. Like, I didn't enter recovery and think all drugs were bad. I was maybe a little mad I couldn't do them correctly, I guess, in a lot of ways. And I think that there's a lot of nuance lacked overall in general with the depiction of drugs in video games. And I think that's a really important kind of lesson I took from that. So I really like the point out of Fallout, and everyone's, I think it is jarring, especially like when I was younger in Metal Gear Solid. Like being able to smoke a cigarette was like, I felt bad, So I did. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to do this. And then my health started going down, and I was like, oh, okay. So there were consequences kind of baked in, which is an interesting thing. Awesome. All righty. Can you identify any realistic or non-stigmatizing depictions of substance use in a game? Can you identify any stigmatizing depictions?
I'm going to go first. Guys, I was trying to think for a little while about a non-stigmatizing depiction of substance use in a game, where substance use is represented, and there's almost always some kind of commentary or game mechanic that says, hey, this is a negative thing. Until I played Super Mario Wonder. They didn't really say anything about it. It was just kind of fun to find a special flower that creates what is very clearly a drug trip. As I am hallucinating and the audio changes and the visuals change, and every time I encounter this in a different level, the mechanics of how I'm supposed to navigate it change. It's weird and it's great. And Nintendo didn't say, don't do that, it's bad. Nor did they say, this is awesome, maybe try this more. And then I started noticing the connections between that flower and, like, it looks exactly like a morning glory, just for the record. But I think that was a lovely depiction of non-stigmatizing substance use. We're not really making any kind of statement either direction.
Yeah, I also had to really rack my brain, I think, to come up with, or I guess reflect and find what was a non-stigmatizing representation. And I think really only two things stood out to me, two games. One, which I was surprised that I was thinking of, was Somnium Files. Somnium Files, your character is on a dose of medication that is automatically administered. So it's a substance in that it's a medication, and it really is framed through biological term. This is your body's biological need for this medication, and it is given to you. And so I thought that was nice and straightforward. And the other thing that kind of came up to me, or occurred to me when I was thinking of non-stigmatizing, was Dream Daddy has a character that is using substances, using specifically alcohol, and it's very much so framed as maladaptive. And if you choose that date pathway, I guess this is a spoiler for Dream Daddy, so heads up, that character decides that they actually do really need to work on themselves and dedicates themselves to moving towards recovery. So that's how that character's journey is shown. And I felt like that was well represented. And then I think we'll do the stigmatizing after. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I tend to think that it is hard to think of games that are just completely non-stigmatizing. Usually there are elements that are represented better and parts that are represented worse. Maybe the mechanics work really well with the storyline or plot or whatever is trying to be intended, but then how it's handled in dialogue is just not it. But the one that stands out to me, I think, is just parts of Cyberpunk, just in that there is a lot of choice and autonomy. And it does tie into both casual use, there's functional use, where you're not exactly suddenly an addict, you're just using it in a way that either enhances or changes how you interact with storylines. And I think there is a lot of choice in it, which tends to be less stigmatizing. And then, of course, very much linked to quests and the culture built in the game.
I love the idea of autonomy around substance use as a thing. It's something that I think can often be excluded around drug use and substance use in general, is that people can do drugs. Even if it's against the law, you do have to give people autonomy to make choices. There's been countless studies on how mandated treatments are typically not effective in any ways. I actually work for a mandated treatment facility, which is very counter to everything I kind of will stand for up here, but it's very interesting, I think, that, you know, giving someone the opportunity to experience and kind of use substances and experience the consequences as they may come in a game is actually a really good thing, and it's a non-stigmatizing way. In Disco Elysium, one of the scenes that really stood out to me is best boy Kim Kutsuragi is doing an investigation, and this woman has Nacra in her medicine cabinet. Nacra is a fictionalized version of naloxone or Narcan, which is an overdose reversal substance. Someone has an opiate overdose, you give them a dose of this, it saves their life. It's a miracle. It's a miracle drug. But when you're encountered and bring this up to her, you say, I see that you have Nacra in your cabinet. And she counters by saying, it's great when you've used too many opioids, which is, I think, such a beautiful way of engaging this in a non-stigmatizing way. It was almost kind of stigmatizing as, you know, oh, you have this substance that kind of reverses overdoses, you must need this for a reason. And she just counters by saying, yep, it's great when I'm partying too much. And I think that's a really important way to kind of depict the substance in a game. And substance, I guess it's not a complete, like, drug that makes you affected, but it saves you from an overdose. And I think that's, even having that depicted in a game is such a different level of thought, I think, that kind of sometimes is overlooked. You want to do stigmatizing? Okay, whoever wants to jump in.
I can launch it because I think about it in a few different categories, and one is that kind of demonstrating to people the maladaptive, like you can use like substance use or you can use alcohol as a social lubricant, and just kind of demonstrating that without the consequences. So that would be like that romance trope or Mass Effect. But then I think the truly stigmatizing depictions are those that present the substance use as, or people who use substances as like monstrous. So I think BioShock was what really stood out to me. There's like the kind of craze, like the people who are like crazed on drugs in BioShock 2. And then the other category are those games that have an extremely like simplified, almost cartoonish, like flat character who's using substances. And what stands out to me for that category is Detroit. Detroit, I think it's becoming human. I always forget the verb. But the character in that, or in general, there's a few characters that abuse substances, and they're shown as being pretty much, I think, as flat as you can show a character like that. Like, oh, their motivation is to use and like to be horrible to the people in their lives. So yeah, those are my two stigmatizing versions, because they're kind of presented uncritically and matter-of-factly, which I think can be particularly harmful.
Yeah, like any games that turn it into a one-dimensional, uncomplicated moral issue. Yeah.
Yeah, drugs bad, not drugs good. And it's also just a shortcut of so many games will show not even related to the main character, maybe their backstory or family or other characters, just using drugs as a means of portraying them being villains or protagonists without any other information. Mm-hmm. They show them doing drugs or or drinking, and you just know that this person is not a good guy in the game. And I think my other one to add would be anything that glorifies it. Mm. Grand Theft Auto is a really good example that's very straightforward of, hey, let's just make it a free-for-all, and there really aren't any consequences. This is a way that you become a better character by doing substances.
I think one more I just have to mention is it's one of the ones where I like had to put down my controller for a moment. the substance that you can get to cure addiction in Starfield is called junk flush, and I'm like, just a lazy naming convention around that. I was like, come on. If you put a little more into it and like less stigmatizing language, I think such a big part of combating stigma is through the language we use and stuff. And when you're kind of using the junk flush as, you know, a play off of junkie, is very, very kind of, it's rough, you know, it's not nice to hear. And if you're someone playing that game that might be struggling, you might not feel a good way about that.
Yeah, even the semantic difference between like, are you sober right now versus are you clean has a very different feel, with clean having the more like kind of gross connotation to substance use.
Yeah, I could get like so into language. And there's so many different things that are always evolving around that. Like I typically use the term people who use drugs now. I used to say people with substance use disorder, but there's people that don't have substance use disorder that are using drugs. People who use drugs has been kind of the term I've been going with lately, and I think that might change again too. It really is so different depending on things, but I think it's tough to hold, you know, video game narratives to the correct language, but I think even just putting a little effort into it could really, really help to make a player not feel stigmatized if they have family struggling or themselves are struggling with substance use issues. From a narrative perspective, what are your thoughts on substance use depictions or story beats? Do you feel it is on par with other mental health issues tackled in games?
I'll jump in and say that I think that substance use, particularly alcoholism, is used as a vector to talk about other mental health issues. I kind of struggle to think about times when mental health issues or conditions are portrayed without being accompanied by substance use. Not to say that that's not very common in the real world, but it is very much like, you know, if somebody has PTSD, they're definitely going to be drinking. If somebody is depressed, you know, they're smoking cigarettes. And it's just such a flawed and stigmatized way to portray things.
I think it works as kind of a shorthand, though.
Yeah. It does.
Yeah. A lot of people who are coping with
Foca
different
deprimente, tá
mental
vendo?
health issues are
É,
finding relief however they
tá
can.
vendo?
And substances
É mal pra
are a
saúde.
perfect solution to
Fumar.
every one of your problems for a moment. I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but as a short-term solution, it kind of makes sense for why anyone would be attracted to substance use. And so if I'm playing a video game and I like encounter a home or a room and there are empty alcohol bottles everywhere, it's telling me a story about whoever dwells there right away. And that's one of the first thoughts that crosses my mind, whether or not it's accurate.
That character's like going through something,
Yeah.
right? That's like presently in a way that is not like healthy or potentially makes them unpredictable. Yeah, I think that what you guys are tapping into is a really good point about where games sit in like media, right? And media uses a lot of like tropes and like visual shorthand and stuff. And I think that's why like the purpose behind or like the pathway that is presented and the representation is so important. I often think of Life is Strange as a character that I think is a veteran, and I think they're shown like bottles, right? Like there's alcohol consumption ends up being like a red herring for and I remember being a little disappointed that the character was shown so one-dimensionally in a game that was so intensely about like mental health. And I think, you know, it's interesting. I think that speaks to the question about, is it different than other mental health issues in games? They do tend to come together. And I think only recently are we seeing like more discussion of where coping, like just the existence of coping skills in games, right? Not substance use as one of like many coping skills and a not helpful one, but coping skills are just kind of on the periphery now of conversations in games. Something I like to point out a lot is in Final Fantasy VII when Barrett is like freaking out in one of the reactors, I forget, in the first game, remake, and he sees Cloud kind of do a muscle release type coping skill and then mimics it. I was like, this is so different than the first time I engaged this narrative. They were all like Gen Xers, now they're like millennials and Zoomers, and they have like some mental health literacy. That being said, I there's this new kind of trope that I see where a character has a panic attack and the way you fix it is you fight them, which I don't think is great mental health representation. So I guess it's complicated.
We were talking about it earlier,
Yeah.
but there's a character in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that is differently portrayed than he was in Final Fantasy VII. And he actually, it's very pertinent to this because he has alcohol bottles and he's kind of throughout his floor and he's kind of not doing well. But it's more so very kind of not explained why he's having mental health symptoms. And he has a panic attack, so you fight and kill him. So it's not the best way to do it, I think. It's very different from a very thoughtful, I think, person dealing with trauma in the original game, and it's kind of changed in a way that really did sit well with me. It's my favorite game, too, so it was really tough. But I think the presence of alcohol bottles, too, was kind of to convey, oh, he's not doing well, you know? We'll put those on the floor, too, just to add to this a little bit in a very lazy kind of way, I think. With Life is Strange, too, that you mentioned that, it's a red herring that this person might be up to something because they're drinking, you know? I think that's kind of a very, very not good place to start, you know?
Yeah, they could just be phenomenally bored.
Yeah.
And honestly, that breaks my heart. But sometimes it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
I think that in speaking in a real broad, general sense, substance use depictions can be done really thoughtfully when they are like core to the narrative experience. It's when substance use gets just kind of like peppered in as like another thing. It's part of the human experience, or it's a way that we can like give you a buff or a debuff or some health, and that tends to leave me kind of disappointed.
Yeah, if it's in there, make it matter. Tie it to the plot, tie it to connection between characters, to something about the character itself, not just, hey, there's this bonus thing.
All right, so from a game mechanic perspective, what are your thoughts on substance use depictions in games? Should substance use be tied to game mechanics?
Este ano, a PAX West, como for sair em
We've
2026,
danced around it. I think we started.
eu vou estar trazendo ela na íntegra.
Should it be tied to game mechanics? Should we take this in reverse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go
Me
ahead.
first? Okay. I think, I always think about this with panels, especially at PAX, that like, I think there's a lot of pressure in these discussions on like game developers and writers, right, to come up with like new ways. And so I think it's easy to say like, yes, definitely if you're gonna put substances in your games, think about the game mechanics.
A trazer logo na sequência, hein?
I think there are ways to do it, different ways, and I think for a very long time
Quero
there was a barrier.
adiantar o máximo de
It was very
vídeos que eu
hard
puder para a
to
minha
kind of
viagem,
do
como eu
these
falei,
types of
né, no
things,
vídeo
but now you can have a longer
de Call of
game, you can
Duty.
have games with like more code, a bigger file size, so like you can include something beyond a wobbly
Parece que está
screen.
sendo pouco
You
antes
can
do Call
have
of Duty,
like
mas vou
if
mencionar
your
isso aqui de
character
novo.
engages in like substances.
Eu
The
vou
sound
adiantar o
gets
máximo de
warped.
vídeos
I
que eu
often
puder
think
para
of the
minha viagem de
scene in Final
dezembro.
Fantasy VII
A
Remake
data
also
ainda
when
não
they're going up the
tenho
staircase, and like
exata,
the
mas quero
camera
usar a data dia
gets really
22
bizarre and the sounds get
como
distorted and
referência.
stuff. So you can do more
Eu viajar
with
no dia
like
22
the
ao
game
dia
mechanics. You can mess
18.
up
Por
like
que
the UX, maybe the UX,
esses
like the
dias?
HUD, the
Porque,
heads-up display is not accessible anymore. There are more
porque
things that you can do.
Natal, Ano Novo e
And
aniversário
then
da
from a
Nath.
narrative
Então quero fazer
perspective,
os
there's so
três,
many different, I
celebrar os
think
três
that's
ao
what you were
mesmo
saying,
tempo.
like we were kind of tapping into it before. You can show other parts of the experience, whether it's someone who's already in recovery and they're engaging with other characters, or maybe it's not central to their plot, but it's something that comes up in a random conversation, or someone
Então,
relapses
tudo
and then
que
they recover, right? I do often, this is in different
conhece
pieces
a
of media,
Nath.
but
E eu
if a
nunca
character's
fiz
shown
por
in recovery, I'm like,
nenhuma
oh no, this
pessoa.
character's gonna, like, they're setting this up so that's a plot device that this character's gonna
Até
relapse.
pude conhecer uma pessoa que joga
It would
comigo
really subvert
videogame,
that trope
de
if
vez em
someone
quando.
just was
A
casually in
Regiane
recovery.
Martins,
Right? So I think
uma senhora bem
there's
gente
pressure
fina.
on people to write different types of narratives and create different types of game
Eu
mechanics, but I
conheci
think
ela
it's never
no
been
Adolescente
more
Sexta-feira
possible
13 e
to do so.
a gente já quase nos vemos em
Regarding the
pessoa.
should, I just think it needs to matter. Like, is the depiction of substance use actually relevant to the plot? If it's tied to a mechanic, is it just an excuse to have that mechanic and we could have done 5 other things? Or is it because, like, narratively, this character needs or is driven to or feels forced to engage in substance use? And, like, what does that mean for the gameplay experience?
É a
Like,
única pessoa
why
que
am
quase
I
me conheceu,
continuing
hein?
to go back to this well? What is it making me think
Você
of?
vendo
What does it
o
tell
vídeo,
me about
Regiane,
not
beijo
just the
pra você, minha
character,
amiga.
but like the economy, the culture, everything tied into this game? Why is it here? Games are like so cool to me in that they can represent or simulate real life. And are we doing it arbitrarily, or are we doing it with intent?
Yeah, everything should have meaning, especially in video games where it is possible
Outro
to
detalhe, lembrando,
collaborate, not just the writer or the
tem
people
vídeo
making the
que
game,
deve
but
ter
everyone who playtests it, everyone who
colocado
plays before it's
antes
finally
desse aqui,
released. It's an iterative process where
que é
people can, even if the
o
meaning wasn't
vídeo
intended, they can say, oh, does this mean this?
do dia
And
25
it
às 4 da
can.
tarde. Foi
And
removido daquele horário
I
para
also just
botar o
love the idea
trailer
of more subtle
da
mechanics
pré-ordem do
of,
GTA e a minha
passive
pré-venta,
skills opening
hein?
up because you now have this
Lembrando,
experience
nessa
of
época, eu
doing
fiz,
something like
na
substance
semana passada, eu
use,
fiz 2
whereas if you
pré-ventas,
don't do
provavelmente.
that in a
Não
knocked-out
uma,
system,
2.
you just don't have that
Uma
experience,
da
you don't have
versão
that knowledge.
digital,
It could open
mais
conversation
cara,
dialogues. You could have opportunities
e
to do
outra
different quests
da
or have different
versão
missions with people because you are now engaging with a
é,
culture with substances.
Collection Edition.
I think there's also places where we can use it as a way to maybe like shift or flip like the vibes of a game, just like in Mario World, as you were talking about, where now you're in a different dimension, or you're in a different world, or you are connecting with a past version or a past ancestor who did the same substance.
At least perceptually. Be weird if I could truly travel. Brian, I have a question for you.
Yes.
When you wanted to steady your aim in Metal Gear and you took a benzo, was there another way to steady your aim?
I don't think so. I think that was the only way. I mean,
A
yeah,
minha
you could
ideia,
make
galera, é
it,
trazer todo
less
que
sway
conteúdo
if
aqui
you
do canal,
approach and
explodir
land
o
on the
canal.
ground, but if you're in prone
Mas
position,
como
no,
tá
the best way
conteúdo
was to do
voando,
benzodiazepine.
Yeah, that's how I remember it. Does that sound right? Because it's a long time ago that I played Metal Gear, so I'm anxious on stage to make a claim.
Oh,
Yeah, okay, so I have 2 options. And both are highly addictive. And I think it would be really cool if, like, I wanted to steady my aim, I had any way to go about it, even if it was deeply inconvenient. But they built that substance use into that mechanic, and it's the primary way I can have steady aim. And, like, that kind of sucks. I don't really know what I'm learning from that experience. So should they be tied to game mechanics? I think so. I think it makes it a richer experience. I think I can often walk away having more to think about and consider. But I think agency, like we talked about earlier, is really important. And if it's just the solution to the problem, it's not very interesting.
That's such a good point. Player agency and player expectations are so important and speak to the thoughtfulness element that we were talking about before. So like, I know we were talking about like substances like alcohol and opioid use and stuff, but it reminds me of in Skyrim, I was really enamored by the mechanic or like the quality of the game that you can like eat almost anything. So like I would go around eating most of the things that you can eat. It says I can eat the ash? Absolutely. So my character was just putting everything in its mouth. And there's a plot point at some point where a voice came up and was like, "You've consumed human flesh, like we should hang out." And I was like, "What? I did?" Like I eat a lot of things. So my expectation there wasn't really tied to like what was happening. So I think about what your players are going. Like I was just really fun, like having a lot of fun
Outro
eating
detalhe,
things.
lembrando, mas vocês
I
também.
think I would have paused if I knew that I was eating human flesh in
Esses
the game.
eventos eram para
So.
estar já no canal
And that's
faz
not
tempo,
unrealistic.
da
In
Pax
which,
West.
you know, people
Eu
who
tive-
are doing illicit drugs because there isn't a platform to get a lot of illegal substances
Ó, tô aqui no
safely.
show ao mesmo tempo,
Doing
né?
the drug
Então
that
eu
somebody
deixei isso
gave
aqui
you,
de
you
lado.
don't know what it
Esqueci dele
is. Maybe you
depois.
did accidentally eat human flesh. Well, it wasn't cocaine. It was your grandmother's ashes.
Speaking of not knowing what it is, just gave me flashbacks to the Binding of Isaac. Walking around, finding pills, and knowing it might be good, it might be bad, and not memorizing the colors of both sides of the caps, and just rolling the dice every time. I don't have a broader point. You just reminded me of the
That
stress.
mimics my personal
Yeah.
experience back in the day too. So, but no, and this is one of those things where it's like, should I say this? I'm going to say this. So this is like going to go against pretty much everything that I would really think as a social worker and really kind of a stigmatizing way to look at things. But is it? When I was addicted to opioids, I can think of it now as like the most difficult roguelike I've ever played, because I would wake up every morning and I would have to figure out a way to make a certain amount of money to make it so I was not sick.
Yeah.
And I would encounter all of these ridiculous circumstances on a daily basis and have to do that. And that's a roguelike in a lot of ways. And I guess it's because I was learning things along the way that would enhance my skills in that area. And I think it would be a fascinating game, but I don't know if it could ever be done in a good way that I would be agreeable to. But it's a very kind of weird
detalhe
gamifying
muito
way of
importante.
like my life. It's kind of going, I guess, the opposite way of this.
Nunca
But it's something that I
fumem
thought about one day.
coisa de uma
I
criança,
kind of
hein?
laughed in my car for a while of how ridiculous it is,
Ou
but
de
it
outra
really was
pessoa.
my experience. So.
O próximo. Porque eu não sei se ela tem problema de pulmão.
Can video games as a medium help educate their audience by depicting substance use in a non-stigmatizing way?
Problema respiratório, alguma coisa
I think
assim.
we've kind of touched on this quite a bit. I do think that like having things like a fictionalized version of naloxone in a game is important. I think that having characters that use substances
Eu
that
recomendaria
aren't,
melhor não fumarem, nunca
that
na
aren't just
vida.
there even, you know? There's someone that uses substances within a game that's a background character. It can be important too, that it's just not depicted in a negative way. I can't think of anything
A
else
pessoa
on
que
this
comprar um
one?
cigarro deve ser multada.
It's funny, I was thinking of your
Aquele que
roguelike
vende
example.
o dobro da multa,
Educational.
ou triplo.
I guess my comment on this is, before I did clinical psych, I worked in like 2 different areas. So like personality psychology, where do people get their sense of identity? And then also I have a degree in like religion as well. So like, how do people learn from like religious stories pretty much? And I think games fall into those categories, right? They show really intense, sometimes like idealized versions of things. They're almost like folktales, right? And you know, for like me, as I prepare to become a parent, I found myself thinking of like Barrett from Final Fantasy VII, because that was like my like mental image of like what a parent could be like. And so I think that absolutely people are seeing representations in games, and they're negotiating their own sense of what skills I can possibly have or what my identity is through these games. Yeah, that's my comment.
So the question, can it happen? I think it's obviously like yes, but there's an asterisk there. Like, will it happen? Should it happen? When it happens, is it done well? And the thing that scares me the most about depicting substance use in a non-stigmatizing manner is the like ethics and morality that just gets kind of mixed into it. When we say depicting substance use, we haven't really defined what that means. Non-stigmatizing, we haven't really fully defined what that means. And then I have so many like caveats in my head. Are we talking about a non-stigmatizing representation of the user or the drug in question or the way in which the drug was used? All of these things really matter, and if we kind of gloss over that and we make it one homogeneous thing that we're depicting, it starts to lose meaning.
So Jared, what I'm hearing is that you could potentially prepare an entire document that if someone consulted with you, you can define these terms for them. So maybe people should consult with people who work in mental health or have experience, right? I think what is the term? Advisory council? Yeah.
Consultation?
And also consultation, yeah.
I'm blushing. That's not why we're on stage. Let's move along.
I think that like one thing that's really clear to me is like there's so much of this is nuanced. There's really no good answers, unfortunately, to any of these questions. I think so much of it depends on, and that can stink. I think there is a appropriate way to do it, thinking ethically, and I think that will not speak to everyone's experience. Even the language used in 12-step fellowships is different than the language used in clinical settings, is used in the language depicted in, on a TV show that depicts substance use. And they're all so different that I don't think you can ever satisfy everyone if you're trying to not have the person who uses drugs to be stigmatized. If you're trying to not have the drug itself be stigmatized, it might differ greatly. So it really is tough to kind of negotiate all those things. But yeah, I just want people to start thinking about it a little bit, so.
Yeah, I'll briefly say off the religious note that I think that there is a way to use it where it does show that people in everyday life use substances. Since the beginning of humanity, it's
Eu
very
tomo
much baked into
medicamento,
art, to
tomo,
culture, to
mas eu tomo
religion.
para controlar a
There are
epilepsia.
rituals, there are rites of
Desde
passage,
pequena
there's
me dava,
history.
porque eu não
This is
uso
inherently storytelling
o
and
pessoal usa
inherently part of a
a
human
droga.
narrative.
Eu não.
It is also healing. It is not just harmful. And I think that there is an avenue to explore emotional development of characters and identity and not just use it as like recovery and substance use and relapse as a permanent debuff.
All right, can video games as a medium help people struggling with substance use disorder?
Yes.
I think we've definitely touched on this a bit. If anyone has anything they want to say in particular?
Well, I think in addition to what we've said before, I know we were talking about just in general, like when you're in recovery, especially early recovery, it's hard to, you have to come up with like a list of coping skills, different things to do. So I've definitely, with patients, talked about putting video games on that list. So just, that's the other way, right? We focus a lot on like the mechanics and the narratives, but functionally, video games are so helpful because often, like, it could be hard to come up with things other than using, especially because substances are self-reinforcing, right? They auto-populate in your mind as an option. So building out the games instead is very helpful.
And
Mas
not
jogar
only,
videogame
like, are or were substances something to
é
do,
uma
they were
boa
often something to do while
distração
doing
para
everything
poder
else. And so for a lot of individuals
deixar
in
o
early
cigarro ou
recovery,
alguma coisa que você fume,
like the
que
world
não
goes
é boa
by,
para a
like
saúde.
things that used to be
Tá
fun
vendo?
stop being fun.
Videogame
It's
é
hard to
bom.
find anything that's fulfilling or engaging. And for a lot of people, you got to get
Para abandonar
past that initial hump. But even after
substâncias
that first hump, everything's still
proibidas.
getting muted. Anything that
Videogame é
can
bom para esquecer
provide
essas
some
substâncias.
fulfillment, some encouragement, some motivation, some way to make time pass at all is a beautiful thing. And yeah, video games as a broad medium can and do help people struggling with substance use disorder, whether that is active or in recovery.
And to that, like to further emphasize, many people with substance use, when they're in recovery, lose access to friends, to peers, to places, to activities that they got used to doing that they can no longer engage in without feeling safe, feeling supported. Video games both offer that therapeutic escapism that does have the engagement that can be distracting enough when everything is so numbed out and difficult. But it's also collaborative. There are so many multiplayer video games. There are so many games
Multiplayer,
that you
eu acho
do where
que
you
é perda de
connect
tempo.
to other people.
That's such a good point. Yeah, that there's like a whole culture. Yeah.
I really like that. I didn't even think of
Especialmente
that.
jogos
Seeing
com
that as a
Call of
way to
Duty.
build back up your community and stuff. That's incredible. When my clients tell me that they're playing video games, especially the ones in early recovery, I'm like, good. Like, let's talk about that. I think it's such an important thing to be filling that
Call of
time, as
Duty,
you all mentioned.
Fortnite.
And
Algo
to
así.
tell personal stories. But when I left treatment, I didn't know what to do with my life. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I had been using for so long. It was over, 10, 12-year period. I was like, I don't really know what I like
Outra coisa
anymore.
que
So I reverted to the things I
também
liked
não
before
é
I
boa
started
para a
using
saúde
substances, which was video games.
atual,
And
corpo
I played Final Fantasy VII in a
tatuagem.
sober house, and I filled my hours, and it got me a good time to like kind of reassess and
E
recenter
com
myself and
essas
kind of
piercing, como é
just be able
chamado em
to
inglês,
have that old familiar feeling of something
aretes.
that was really homey and really important to me and kind of bring me back and center
Por
me.
exemplo, você pode botar
Kind
no
of really
umbigo,
kickstarted my recovery, I guess, in a lot of ways, which is
no
what I'm realizing a little
nariz.
bit now. But no, it's a really
Não,
important experience, and I do think that,
não é legal.
as an example,
Botar como
yes,
brinco
to answer to this one.
na orelha.
All right. I do want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A, so this one,
It's a lightning round.
yeah, we're going to
Claro,
lighten
sendo
around
uma
this.
mulher,
Narratives and
até
storylines can be I won't
botar
be
um brinco
the
na
first.
orelha, mas um homem
Narratives and
botar um brinco na
storylines can be
orelha,
interpreted in
isso é até
multiple
bizarro.
ways. Are substance use depictions even necessary to provide space for people with addictive disorders to see themselves in games? That one was really wordy. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. I feel like we kind of got at this one.
Yeah. Necessary is the word that bothers me in this question. I don't think most things are necessary, and in this case, I don't think substance use depiction is necessary to provide space, but I think it can be helpful for some. I think it would be a loss, it would make me sad if it was just removed, like if we went in the opposite direction. But again, it's all context.
I like that. I think I like that I included that word necessary just so I could hear that.
Just to bother me?
Personagens vão entrar numa
No,
guilda.
this one came up for me playing
Vamos
Claire
fazer
Obscura
meu jogo
recently, and I
pouquinho.
think it has a lot of narratives that speak to people with certain trauma histories, substance use disorder histories, mental health issues that can be interpreted.
Ele é uma
without
semana começa a
explicitly
gravar, galera.
saying those things in a lot of ways around escapism and kind of losing lots of people.
Devo
which
estar
is
gravando, melhor dizendo,
a
na
lot
hora
of
de fazer
people, when
esse
you do
vídeo.
stop using substances, you have a lot of friends that did use substances, and you lose a lot of
A
people
edição
around
da
the way,
Marvel
and
do
kind of do it
Magic
for the
Arena.
people that come after it in a lot of ways, and I think that was kind of displayed in that game quite a bit. So that's why I was like, oh, I gotta put a question about this.
Yeah, and I'd say the folks that I've talked to who are in recovery do enjoy or at least appreciate when substance use is depicted, especially with addiction in video games and in role-playing games specifically, where you don't have to be addicted to those substances, but you can still, as a character, choose not to engage in those things. I think that offers opportunity to reinforce positive decisions while also not just saying, hey, this doesn't exist. You can practice,
Pode chegar no final, galera.
refusal in a safe way and still engage with a storyline without just completely pretending like it's not a thing.
Da palestra.
And before I make bad on my promise about talking about Darkest Dungeon, I'm going to say like 2 sentences. But like, what I've observed with substance use in a lot of video games is you use it and there is a pro and or a con, and then it is over, and then you can use it again, and pro and or con, and then it's over. Maybe I can pay a bunch of caps, and make it all go away. But mostly it seemed to be the lesson was drugs can be fun, they can kind of be bad, and you can usually revert back to the norm. And that is not necessarily like a fully helpful response to convey. It's not a great message to convey to players. I really liked how in Darkest Dungeon, substance use was a way to handle stress, one of several ways to handle stress. And if somebody overindulges in that way, maybe it's fine, but every time you do it, there's a chance it's not going to work out for you. You might develop like an inclination to only use substances, or you like don't actually come home that after that night of drinking and stress recovery. That character is not available to me for a whole nother expedition because they went off on a bender, which can happen. But it's such a nice depiction of the unreliability of that as a solution, as well as kind of flying too close to the sun with the frequency of using that as a solution. And yet the agency's still there. It still serves a function. I like the nuance and complexity there. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'll stop talking about a 5-year-old game.
nuance is the thing that I think is the main focus. There needs to just be more nuance on substance use depictions. And I do like just what you just said is really, I think, getting at the nuance of there's not just one effect that happens with the use of a substance. It can be many varying things based on many varying things. And I think having attention to that is a real step in the right direction.
Yeah, and do it subtly off screen, have things happen where you're like, why did that happen? And maybe you don't know it's because you used that substance. Later you're just like, why did I never have that option? Well, because you didn't go home.
This is just any final thoughts? Where do we go from here? Anything anyone wants to kind of end with?
I think more humanized characters where there's more empathy shown, more resilience without all the moral judgment. And I think more ambiguity along with the nuance. It's not black and white. It's not good or bad. It's not you get this buff or you get a debuff. Other than that, I think just more representation of other substances aside from like illicit recreational drugs. Like, I want to see a reminder to take your ADHD medication. I want to see you have to take your insulin whenever you eat, a whole table of food at a temple. I want to see mutual aid and long-term changes.
Yeah, and I think my final thought is that for any mechanic like this or any plotline like you're talking about, like there are people out there, like gaming, one of the things we're talking about is like gaming is a community, right? And there are people who have all different types of experiences and all different types of things that they're ready to talk about. So for anything that you want to weave into your game, there's someone you can like consult with or speak with about the topic. And then you don't have to rebuild the wheel or try to figure it out. You can just work with that person and learn what would be helpful to put in a game. And also, something else I've seen that's really nice is when there's really intense depictions of substance use or anything, it's always nice to include a link or some sort of resource towards further information if someone, or further resources if someone gets overwhelmed. So definitely good practice to do those two things.
Yeah, and the rating system. It's like, if there's cigarettes, it's the same as if there's more extreme depictions of drugs. And I think having links to more detailed stuff allows people to engage in a more intentional way of why is somebody smoking a cigarette, which kids can see pretty much anywhere in a public space, going to be rated harshly. We should have more clarity around that.
And content warnings up front probably that are informative.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep my takeaway as simple as I can. It kind of boils down to function and complexity. What's the function or purpose for either the representation of substance use or the mechanics tied to them? I want it to matter and not just be some superfluous or throwaway representation, if it's going to be there at all. And I want to keep things complicated. How does that affect the mechanics or the person in general? I think when we reduce things to their simplest form, sometimes that can be a huge boon, but when we are talking about substances, we're losing a lot in the conversation.
Awesome. All right, Q&A. If anyone would like to ask questions, line up. Please just try to ask questions about the content of this. If you want to talk stories or any personal experiences, I'm happy to talk to you later, or I'm sure anyone will. But just try to keep it to the panel.
Yeah, we're going to try to aggressively churn through these, and when we inevitably fail, we will talk to you more in the hallway, far away from the doors.
Also, if anyone wants to rate the panel, you can do that. There's a QR code. All right, hi.
Hi there. Thank you for the panel. I wanted to ask your thoughts on the rules of PAX. If you've noticed on your name tag, rule 1 is drugs are bad. And is this the right approach?
I would like to be invited back, but no, I don't love the wording. I totally understand not wanting people illicitly using substances at your event, though, and the risk that runs. I maybe would suggest maybe not having them be categorized as bad.
Yeah. Aren't they selling coffee out there?
Yeah.
Is
it Red Bull just giving away things?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a new, I like everything we've kind of talked about. I think there's so much nuance to this that is sometimes not seen. And I know that changes happen over time and how things are looked at. I definitely would not, ever advertise like this is a place to use substances.
Yeah.
I don't think this is an appropriate place for that. But yeah, that wording could be, I think, workshopped a little bit maybe.
Will these drugs help your PAX experience? What is the utility?
It's a cheeky question. I love it. I think that contextually, drugs are bad in this space because like the hosts don't appreciate them. And that's not a broader statement about drugs. I also think there's not a lot of space
Limit
on the back
drugs.
of this badge, and we had to keep it simple.
Limit drug
And
use.
this is, I guess, a time I'm advocating for simplicity.
Yeah, it communicates the point.
Hi there. I love the question about like how games can be helpful for people who are currently experiencing drug addiction or substance use disorder. I was interested in pushing it a little further in that like I've heard stories anecdotally about how people have benefited, for example, from the animation of the bird walking along, interacting with the little like bead of nectar, right? Someone's nodding, yes, excellent. That is a form of media in which people can better understand what they are currently experiencing, that it can be better reflected, like, oh, this is what I'm experiencing, this is the relationship that I have. So do you think, to the panel, within the current state of what we have for drug depiction in video games, there is space for people who are experiencing those kinds of things to use it in the same way, where it's not just media that is passing time, but is also providing space for reflection, for better understanding, for a maturation of my understanding of my relationship with the drugs that I use, hypothetically.
Anyone want to go?
Celeste?
I feel
I saw
like
your
Brian's
mouth
about
open.
to say something.
No, go ahead, please.
I think, yeah, it's funny. I was thinking this as we were talking about people in recovery using games as a point of recovery, is that it would be helpful to have these narratives in there, right? It leads naturally that you might want to see something and engage in a healthy way or engage in a different way, or in general just have an experience represented. So I do think there's a place for that. I don't know, does that kind of encapsulate what you guys were thinking, or is there anything you want to add?
It was just a complex question, and I'm anxious that we have failed the brief.
I know.
Like, what are we neglecting? Briefly, yes.
Yeah.
I guess the only part that I was trying to get into is that, like, I'm interested in where you think the limitations are, right? That there is not every aspect of relationship that currently exists with people and drugs in video games. So do you think that there is enough space in how people see drugs depicted in video games to have that breadth of sort of like, and we can show someone this and they would understand better what they're going through in the same way that we can with simple animations, with film, with television, that sort of thing. Because I feel, in opinion, that there is more maturation in that space in terms of breadth, in terms of complexity, in terms of nuance.
Yeah, I think indie games and short form games have really opened up that availability. There are a couple games that I can think of that are maybe an hour or two in length, very much plot story driven. One of them is very much focused on what having depression is like. I think that what you're talking about in indie games where drug use isn't necessarily like a part of a broader story where it is the focus.
Para focar nesse tipo de coisa, para poder ensinar que é bom.
I think all art mediums can convey
não é bom
some
também.
element of this. I think video games
Como Police Life Simulator, para dar como exemplo.
because we can interact and not just observe.
Police Patrol
And
Simulator
I'd love to keep
também.
talking about this, but I want to let one more question get asked.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I am also obsessed with Darkest Dungeon, so like,
Nice.
I got you. I was kind of curious of the clients that you work with that play video games, have you noticed like a general like theme or genre of games they play, or is there one that just like pops up really regularly?
Oh man,
That's a hard question.
I want to say.
Role-playing games. That's what I think. But I mean,
Eu não sei
I
se
think
tem
that's
painel
so contextual
entre as
and
partes
what
desse ano ou do ano passado
intersectionality.
e falando sobre game
clients that you
developer.
work with.
I work with a very random population. It's not like very segmented. I mean, it's mandated treatment. So I get a lot of COD, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
But recently had a client say that he's been playing a lot of Diablo 3, and it's been a great experience for him because he didn't play it when he was using it. It takes up a lot of his time, and that's been good. But it's been kind of all over the place, but usually it's mostly COD when I ask.
I've had all different types. I was thinking, I worked in a college counseling center for a while, so yeah, definitely all different types of games. I've had people bring up like mobile games and stuff. I don't really see any unifying. I find it just anecdotally an interesting question that comes up if I connect to a patient about games is they ask me who I romanced in a game, and I'm like, oh, this is an interesting question to encounter as a therapist. Like, how do I move forward? Yeah, but yeah.
Thanks.
That's a fun question. I
Yeah.
think my disappointing answer is I am struggling to find a consistent pattern.
Yeah.
People are really variable.
Everyone plays.
Yeah, we have 10 seconds before we make PAX sad,
Yeah.
so we can't take any more questions, but I do want to do that in the hallway for everyone interested, because these are all really fun questions. And thank you all for being here. Brian, I'm taking over your role.
No worries.
Yeah.
Really quick. Tomorrow or the day after is National Overdose Day. If anyone is able to, try to find a place
Next
that does
in,
narc training near
19,
you.
Soldier of Ages plays Wilder, PAX East 2000, close, button. Pause, play, button. Video.
Bom, galera, ótimo painel. Gostei muito do que eles falaram para parar o pessoal de fumar, né? Já é hora de acabar com essas fábricas de cigarros e outras drogas. Já é hora de acabar com essas porquerias. Ótimo painel. Espero que tenham gostado. E nos vemos nos próximos eventos aqui no canal. E lembrando, dia 11 de setembro. Não, 11 não. Entre 11 e dia 22 de setembro, por aí mais ou menos. Eu quero soltar os dois conceitos que eu tenho aqui da facção 2025. Por aí mais ou menos. Se não soltar nessa data, gostaria depois de gravar a Toque Game Show. Tá bom? Vamos ficando por aqui então. A gente volta no próximo vídeo da PAX West ou outros. Valeu, galera. Beijos. E mais que está sendo entre o dia 5 e o dia 8. Ok? Valeu, galera. Beijos.
Iniciar janela. OBS 28. Tela.
É o primeiro de dois, hein?
Opções de energia. OBS Studio 2. OBS. Interromper transmissão.
Primeiro de dois eventos que vai ser no mesmo dia.